Okay, today's little vid. Changing the quantum, affecting the quantum. Right before I found Brian, the months leading up to it, I went through a really gnarly. It was insane, actually. Totally insane. And at times I thought I was losing my mind, and my family thought I was bordering on insanity and were talking about having me committed. But what was happening was that I was being visited by an angel who was giving me information in my journey to finding Christ on the earth. And a very important part of that information came when I read the book that was written by Greg Braden, who's on the YouTube. You can watch his YouTubes out there. And he's a scientist and a researcher, and he's into theology and the ancient scrolls, researching and digging out the ancient scrolls. Now, he wrote a book called The Isaiah Effect, and I read it, and knew that he'd grasped the truth of what Isaiah understood to be the truth. And the way I understood what Greg was writing was that Isaiah, and indeed the prophets of old, they understood how to pray. It's all about praying, which begins with thought, and that as we come together, or not even come together in the same space and time, but come together in thought, wherever we are on the planet, that we can affect the outcome of where humankind is headed. Now, in the book, he was outlining how Isaiah and a lot of the prophets, there always seemed to be two scenarios, two possible outcomes. On the one side, there's the doomsday scenario, and then on the other side, there's the scenario of a paradise, peace, and paradise, and literally heaven on earth. And he, grasping that these two worlds exist, these two outcomes exist side by side. Now, we can all in our own lives experience various outcomes based upon the decisions that we make in our lives along the journey. And for every situation that we're facing, there are different outcomes that are possible, again, based on those decisions that we make and literally the thoughts that we think. Anyway, the power in the book was that it takes a relatively small amount of people on the earth, not millions of people, but certainly, well, I'm saying, as Brian has always said, just 144,000 in 6 billion, to be thinking the same thoughts and be on the same page at the same time. After I read the book and really downloaded the significance of what he was saying, I remembered during this JCDC part of the DVD the power in the resonation of our words. And certain words are more powerful than others, and the most powerful word that can be spoken from anybody's lips and uttered is, of course, the personal name of the Creator, which is Yahweh. And to give you a demonstration of how powerful it was in my own life, this was all part of this gnarly experience that I was going through. Am I really saying? Turns out I was totally. A new person had walked into my life, and he was sent my way because the friend of mine who was concerned about this man's salvation, literally, thought that I could do the job of convincing him that Jesus Christ actually was the Son of God, because this man was saying that, well, he wasn't convinced about that, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, this person walks in my life on this particular day, and I remember sitting outside the balcony at my mother's apartment in Balmain with the backdrop of Sydney Harbour, and And I just began to speak, and I talk about in the beginning was the Creator, the One. And he had a personal name. And whereas God is his title, like captain of the boat or captain of the ship, whatever, CEO, God is his title, he has a personal name. And that personal name, I said to him, is Yahweh. Well, when I spoke the name Yahweh, this man who was sitting directly opposite me, he went into a shaking mode. He started to shake, tremble all over his body. I stopped in mid-sentence. I was just looking at him like this as I was watching something that I had never witnessed before, as he was literally shaking like this. And then he fell into a slump. And when he came out of the slump, he had a completely different look about him, and he leaned forward into the table and into the conversation and looked at me square in the eye and said, whatever it is that you are about to tell me, I know it to be the absolute truth. And of course I began to continue the sentence. In the beginning it was Yahweh, and then approximately 4,000 years later he sent his son Yahshua. Yah being the name of the Father, and Shua, save. So in the name of the Father, Yahshua saves. Anyway, when I had finished speaking that, he completely received everything because he had that, and he just said to me, so, Jesus Christ is the Son of God. I said, yes. And it was settled like that. He goes, well, that's it. It's settled then. I believe. But what shook me, that was his experience when I spoke that word. And he told me he could feel the vibration, the power go through him as I spoke the word. So that was my experience of somebody having that that effect in the hearing of the name of Yahweh. When later I picked up the book written by Greg Brayton, the Isaiah Effect. Now, when I finished the book, I was actually overwhelmed, and I was consumed with the thought that it's up to us to change what it is that humankind will experience. We have two scenarios. We all know we're headed for the judgment, the great and terrible day of the Lord, and that's to do with the crossing over of the Milky Way galaxy. And that is set to be totally destructive. However, that enough people around the world being on the same page at the same instant in time, and I began to think about 11/11, November the 11th, Remembrance Day, how the whole world stops to remember those that were lost at war. They're remembering the dead on 11 o'clock on the 11th of November, which is the 11th month. And I began to think, what if instead of focusing on remembering the dead, that the whole world stops and focuses and begins giving thanks, even if they think it only, to Yahweh, the living God. This is before I found Brian. But if we began remembering the living God, what effect would that have on the quantum and literally where the planet is headed? You see, there's a very narrow gap in the equatorial line of the Milky Way galaxy, and it's called the Eye of the Needle. And for any of you who are already Christians, if you're listening to this, the Eye of the Needle was referred to by Jesus the first time around, and he actually said that it would be easier for a camel to enter through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. That Eye of the Needle is this very narrow gap in the equatorial asteroid belt that surrounds the Milky Way that we are going to be crossing through. Now, if mankind begins to get on the same page, and I believe it has to do with the remembering and the uttering of the name of Yahweh at the same instant around the planet, I believe that we could shift the quantum and we could end up saving mankind literally by going through the Eye of the Needle.